Well, hello everybody, and welcome, Nate.
Hello, Greg. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Facebook. Not you, Twitter. We don't do that anymore. Anyway, we're excited to be here to talk birds with you all. I'm Nate Swick. That's Greg Neise. We are here with another of our bi-weekly bird identification seminars, webinars, television shows, streaming videos, whatever you want to call it. We're happy to accommodate. We're excited to have you here. We are with the American Birding Association, and the American Birding Association maintains a number of interesting Facebook groups, one of which is called What's This Bird? And this is part of the What's This Bird experience. Good morning, good afternoon to all people who are here enjoying your lunch with us. We've got a great crowd on Facebook. We've got a great crowd on YouTube as well. Hi, Solomon TV's Marsha Lestry, Brett Schoenberg, Archer Silverman, Jim Neitzel, Carolyn Jones, Joe Kwasniewski from Detroit, Michigan, Elizabeth Alton from cloudy Vermont. We got a lot of people. We got a lot of people saying hi today, Greg.
Hey, that's good. Hey, and the web gremlins have been here this morning. I just want to make sure that all of you people out there can hear me. Can you guys hear me?
I hope so. Can you hear me? That's
I hear you loud and clear. I'm hoping everybody out there can hear me as well.
I assume that it's going to be good.
Yep, I assume that if they can't, I'd hear
they
about it by now.
I can't hear you. I just see your mouths working. Hi, folks. We are here to talk birds and bird identification. As I said earlier, the ABA maintains a group called What's This Bird? What's This Bird is a friendly neighborhood bird identification community that we host on Facebook. People take photos of birds that they see when they're out birding. People take photos of birds they see when they are walking around or in their yard or at their feeders or any of those things. And sometimes there are birds that they can't identify. They post them to our wall, and we are here to provide the service of bird identification for whoever wants it. And once in a while, we get some interesting photos that we like to talk about, and that's what we do here. Hola, Marcos Lira from Mexico. Buenos dias to you.
Yeah, and we're also here to talk to you guys. So if you want to talk about something, drop a comment or a question in the comments, and we want to hear from you, and we'll try to get to everything and everybody. As we can.
We're part of what makes this so fun is that this is a wholly interactive presentation. If you have topics that you would like us to take a crack at, or birds that you would like us to identify, or just questions that you have about birds and birding, please throw them at us. We'll take our best shot at them. We've been doing this for a while, so we don't usually get
But be gentle, because we always get
by questions about wild birds, I should say, because every once in a while we get questions about like chickens or pet birds, and I'm sorry, we cannot answer your pet bird questions. Nope. Please talk to a veterinarian.
Although chickens are delicious, but sorry, I had to go there.
Especially their fingers.
How have you been, and how's the birding around you?
It's starting to cool down here where I am. I've been spending a lot of time outdoors and things that don't involve birding, but that doesn't mean that I don't look at birds. Once you're a birder, always birding. Always looking up and seeing what's around. I've seen some broadwing hawks flying over my neighborhood. I saw a broadwing hawk fly through the tree line out my back window today that was absolutely getting hammered by a flock of 10 crows. I felt really bad for that broadwing hawk. But crows go after anything.
They do.
I've heard a lot about birds passing through North Carolina. I haven't been out and see a ton of them myself, unfortunately. But there's stuff everywhere. There's a lot of birds going through. It sounds like the Midwest is having quite a week now.
Well, I'm not sure, but I imagine that many of you have heard about the migration event in Chicago about 10 days or so ago. Wow is all I can say. Birders, especially
both from
newer birders,
an amazement perspective, in the sense that there were all those birds moving through Chicago is one of those massive migration events that is caused by kind of perfect weather conditions, and also the issues that come with birds flying through a major metropolitan area with a lot of glass buildings.
Yeah, it's really been something. And just for those of you who aren't aware, most of this fall migration, there was a consistent weather pattern that had east winds and warm south winds that really had bottled birds up, like up in Minnesota and up in along the Canadian border. when that broke with a good cold front coming in from the northwest, it's like the spigot opened and
Yeah, it's
birds
like
just
popping a champagne cork.
exactly. And
Yeah.
they rode that wave down, and over Chicago hit a narrow band of thunderstorms and created what we call a fallout. Now, a lot of newer birders kind of use that word loose and fast when they see a lot of birds, but a true fallout is something you will never forget. And I've only experienced two in my lifetime. The first one was on my birthday in 1996. Exact same thing happened in May of 1996. And I happened to be downtown in the Loop that morning, going to work at the Aon building, which was, I think, the second or third tallest building in the world at that point. And there were birds. Thank you for calling it the Sears Tower.
It's always Sears to me.
It's always the Sears Tower. And there were birds just literally everywhere. Like every planter on Michigan Avenue was full of birds. It was ridiculous. So that's what we talk about when we talk about fallout. There is a notorious building on the lakeshore called McCormick Place, and it's a convention center, and it's a third of a mile of reflective glass facing the lakefront, and it just killed a tremendous number of birds. There's 1,000 birds in one night, one morning, really. It's a horrible thing, and this building's been doing that for decades, since it opened in the early 70s. I mean, I've got pictures of my mentor picking up birds from the beaches and from McCormick Place in the 70s. I mean, it's been... But anyways, it seems like there's some momentum here, and it's been all over the news. It's made national news. And it seems like there's some real momentum here where this may be where something actually happens. We'll see, but there's a lot of people pushing hard. And so keep up the good fight.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I think it's amazing that friend of the ABA, Marky Muchler, who's a young birder that came up through the ABA Young Birder programs, is now a doctoral student in Chicago. Went out to Promontory Park. Chicago hog butchers the world. Promontory Park. Submitted an absolutely unreal eBird checklist from the lakefront with 100,000 yellow-rumped warblers, tens of thousands of palm warblers, just a lot of birds that couldn't be identified as well, and a great variety of all sorts of migrating songbirds.
Yeah,
and that was, how far away is that from McCormick Place? It's 5 miles.
It's
south.
Yeah, it's probably about 5 miles due south on the lake.
So yeah. Yeah, the highs and lows of fallout in a major metropolitan area.
Yeah, and this happened on a kind of cold and rainy Thursday morning, and it just so happened. I mean, in spite of the growing popularity of birding, it just so happened that we had one person who was trained in how to count birds at that kind of volume that happened to be out on Promontory Point, because if it weren't for that, there was only one other person, Nathan Goldberg, who
also submitted a pretty phenomenal eBird checklist.
But he did that from his back porch.
From the north side.
But there's really only two people that were out there to accurately give us an idea of what kinds of numbers those birds were moving in. So yeah, all around, it was just an amazing thing. And that afternoon I went out my alley, and my alley was littered with palm warblers, and I'm 9 miles from the lake. So that was.
And the flamingo thing's still ongoing. A flamingo turned up in Huron County, Michigan this week, which is absolutely unreal. We had a note in the YouTube comments they're moving, and I'm trying to keep up, from someone that said that one of the Baldwin, Alabama flamingos was attacked by a snapping turtle too. That's the second flamingo that's been attacked by a snapping turtle. These snapping turtles must not know what's going on. They must be...
Well, I think the flamingos don't know what's going on.
Yeah, don't know to avoid it.
They don't have to deal with that in the salt flats in Mexico. So as I said, we talked to you guys here as well, and Laura DeGoyer has from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, says they have a local church that wants to put up an 8 by 4 foot electric sign across from a park in a natural, across from a natural area. Do you have any comments or problems?
I would say as long as they turn it off at night, but I guess that's not the point of an electronic sign.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of too many things like that that actually, that small, that actually affect birds, and it's not reflective. It's usually, high-rise windows that are lit up at night that do that. Christy Bass says Eastern Tennessee just got a record Townsend's warbler. Yeah, those guys got a mega. And with all this push of birds that's come down in the last week or two.
Yeah, we had a couple Townsends in North Carolina as well.
Illinois got a rock wren, which was the first one in 30 years, I think. So there's a lot of birds moving, and we'll get into it a little bit more. But we had a phenomenal hawk watch on the North Shore of Chicago. Chicago. This was, I had assumed just because of the date that we wouldn't get very many broad-winged hawks last Saturday. But boy, there were broad-winged hawks bottled up with everything else. And we had an amazing broad-winged hawk day with almost 3,000 birds, I believe. Yeah. It might have been 2,000. I forget what the exact count was. But we had four Swainson's hawks, which is fantastic. But we had 3 dark phase black broad-winged hawks.
Oh, yeah, those are cool.
Which that was the first time they'd ever been recorded in Illinois, and there were 5 recorded total at hawk watches in Northeast Illinois, which is insane. And those dark-faced broad-winged hawks are
cool looking.
They're good looking, and I think they're from they breed in British Columbia. And migrate through the West. They're very limited range, and they migrate along the Rockies, and we don't see them. So it was, and I managed to get pictures of a couple of them. It was just a phenomenal day.
Well, we'll put a pin in that hawk discussion, Greg. Shall we get moving on the
we're
birds
getting moving here. We're getting moving here right now.
I feel like we'll have opportunities to talk hawks.
We are going to have opportunities to talk hawks, but quickly, just want to mention for those of you in the upper Midwest, the ABA is having an ABA community weekend in Minneapolis, Minnesota, October 28th and 29th. If you're not familiar with this, it is a weekend of birding, free field trips and other events. You can go to aba.org. It's on the front page, and if you have nothing to do that weekend and you're in the Minneapolis area, definitely come birding with us because it'll be a good time. It will be a good time.
Not us.
I won't be there, but yes, us, the bigger us, the grander, the grander us,
organizational us.
Speaking of hawks.
Oh man,
it's that time of year for the.
Greg's been doing this thing lately where he throws up these really ambivalent these birds that I can't really make a real judgment call, or the ones that we might actually disagree on.
You and me both, pal. You and me both.
I'm not sure what's going on here.
Yeah,
we're trying to manufacture conflict in the bird ID sphere.
I try to pick at least one that either I know we're not going to agree on, or that we're just going to throw our hands up on, because and this is the time of year for the never-ending Coopers versus Sharpie debate, and this one comes from Hilton Head, South Carolina, and we've already got Angela Miner going Coop. Yeah, so really,
that was my first impression as well when Greg sent me this this presentation that we were going to show. I looked at this photo because I kind of glanced through them before we come on. I thought Coop, and then 5 seconds later, I'm like, well, because that's how I identify accipiters a lot of times is gut reaction, and then
Yep.
followed by if it doesn't quite fit my what my gut thinks it is, then I start to question it. I think there are reasons to think that this is a coup, especially when you first look at it. It's got what appears to be a pretty significant black cap. It's got a big body, a big deep bellied body. It's very chesty bird, which I usually think of as coops.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at it again, even though it's kind of a soft image, I can't help thinking that this might not be a coop. The bill looks small, the eye looks big. I can't tell whether that's foreshortening or not. There is a little bit of foreshortening going on here. The bird looks like its head is turned away towards the left just a
Mm-hmm.
tad, which makes it a little bit difficult to get a sense of size of those features, which really help you with this identification, especially in a perch bird. But I came around to this being kind of a chunky, big, probably female Sharpie rather than a
So,
coop.
so for those who aren't aware, um, female sharpshinned and male Cooper's hawks are almost the same size,
They overlap.
and there is some overlap, and structurally, it can be very difficult. But
It can be
so
tough.
I threw together a comp here with the bird in question in the middle. On the left is a sharp-shinned hawk. On the right is a Cooper's hawk. And after looking at this and doing a bunch of research and spending way too much time looking at pictures of Coopers and sharpshins, um, I have come around to the bird in question being a sharp-shinned hawk, probably a female. And the reason I feel that is I believe that what we can see in the photo, as Nate said, it's a little bit soft, and there may be a little foreshortening, but I believe that it has that kind of googly-eyed, startled parakeet look face to it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I I think that the what we're seeing there that looks like a dark cap. Notice the little white speckling going on there. That the
Mhm.
bird in the comp to the left also has. They're in similar molt, and those feathers are coming in. Those are pin feathers, I believe, that are coming in. So we're not seeing everything there that might be there.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the bird in question has more of a cowl than
I tend to agree, and I think
than a
that cap
cap.
is sort of stands out a little bit more because the bird has kind of turned its head to the left a little bit, and so we're getting a little more of that. The feathers are sort of misplaced; they're not as clean along the neck, but also because of the smatter the white pin feathers that you pointed out, Greg. I think it's kind of messing with your impression. I mean, everyone knows that when they look at a coop, that black cap for the most part stands out very, very strongly for an adult bird
Yeah.
such as this, whereas the Sharpie looks like it has a cowl or a plastic cap, depending on which Sharpie you are trying to identify. Um, yeah, sorry. That was anyway. Yeah, I agree that this is a Sharpie, but a big Sharpie and a chunky Sharpie. Sometimes Sharpies look very svelte, especially around the waist, kind of past their legs, so they can get really skinny. They have a skinny waist, whereas Coopers look kind of fluffy and big. And this bird definitely has more of a kind of a fluffy, big look in the back end as opposed to the kind of slim Sharpie. But that could be just the way it's sitting, the way it's perched as well. It's not a bird on a tree or on a fence as these birds are showing.
Yeah, so Jason Hall asks, "What is a cowl?" A cowl. The
Cowl,
description from
cowl.
is a hood or a
The
long
judges on
hooded cloak. Um,
the judges on
but
American Idol.
generally, it's just it covers more of the back rather than a cap like
Like a
we see on
hood.
the
Yeah.
more of a hooded look than a capped look. Um, and Jason Hall also says calling them coopies from now on. Yes.
Nice.
But the other thing I see here in this bird in the middle is the way that the dark feathering comes down
Shoot work.
around the eye a little bit more than the Cooper's hawk. And again, these things are all there's no hard fast rule here, but
Yeah, Jimbo in the YouTube comments mentions is what we're talking about, the English term of jizz. Um,
yes,
Jizz. Sometimes people call it gestalt. All
gestalt
sorts of there's all
exactly.
sorts of kind of when we talk about our gut says one thing, that's effectively what we're saying. That's correct. We're sort
Exactly.
of taking in the holistic view of the bird and kind of assigning a name to it just kind of based on feel, which is frequently described by birders as jizz, somewhat
Yes.
sometimes embarrassingly.
Ah. Um. Only if you're younger than a certain age. Um.
Jeff Blanchard also says Batman wore a cowl. Yes, and Sharpies wear a cowl.
Exactly. So before we move on from this one, I would lean I would lean Sharpie without any true conviction on this bird.
Yeah, that's sort of where I am. I'm probably about 85% there. But if someone were to throw another photo up, and this is another call for people to take as many photos as you possibly can when you have a bird that you can't identify, you never know which one is going to be the one that gives you the clue to the identification. If
Exactly.
someone were to show another photo that was more sharp, more in focus, I should say, and maybe show the bird in a profile a little bit better, and it looked like a coop, then I would
More
have
data,
no issue
better.
calling it a coop. But more data is always better. More photos is always better.
So if you haven't picked up on it yet, last time we had a theme of sparrows and wobblers. Today we have a theme of hawks, and so this one comes to us from Ranchester, Wyoming, which I thought was a kind of a funny name for a town.
Manchester.
Um,
Sounds like a
but
guy in a cowboy movie.
Yeah, exactly. A cowboy movie with a good bagel shop at the end of the block. Um, what do you see in here, Nate?
Yeah, so this is we like to break our soaring raptors into groups, right? So buteo, accipiter, eagles tend to be in one big group. There, although a lot of eagles tend to look like very large buteos. So your
Mm-hmm.
buteos are generally your soaring birds with broad wings and relatively short tails, and your accipiters are your soaring birds with relatively short wings and long tails. Well, this bird has long wings and a long tail, so it doesn't really fit in either of those categories. So it's one of those weirdos that kind of are off to the side, like osprey or northern harrier or the kites. Sometimes many of the
Yep.
kites.
Yep.
So the things that kind of stand out to me on this bird, it's clearly got a lot of bands on the tail, long tail that is very
Mm-hmm.
heavily banded all across. It's got a lot of pattern in the flight feathers of the wings, a lot of barring all throughout the primaries and the secondaries. So the primaries are the outer wing feathers, the secondaries are the wing feathers that are attached to kind of the arm of the bird
Mm-hmm.
that make up the trailing edge of the wing. And it's kind of got a darker head, a paler belly. But yeah, you don't always see this species like this, except this time of year when they're moving. They usually stay a little bit lower. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we see them kind of coursing over marshlands or grasslands or fallow fields or things of that nature.
So
But
yeah,
yeah,
as
this is one of those
as
birds that's not really like any of the other flying raptors.
yeah, as Nate mentioned, this bird has a lot of wing. It's
A
got
lot of wing.
very
Yeah.
long hands, which are the flight feathers. You see those five
hmm
flight feathers at the end, the primaries on the end that look sort of like fingers, sometimes
hmm
referred to as a hand. Um, Angela Miner says raptor species. Good call. All right.
Never,
Let's
never
move
gonna get that one
on.
wrong.
Let's move on and talk about this bird a little bit more. And yeah, here we go. So the bird in
Oh,
question,
Greg, you used banding codes.
I did
People are
because
going to
the
be
names are
so
just a
mad
little
at
too
us.
long, but we're going to talk about all of them. The bird in question is at the bottom center, and it is indeed a northern harrier, as Nate
Northern
alluded to.
Harrier.
Um, so on the left of it and above, we have some buteos, and to the right we have our two most common accipiters. And starting, we're just going to kind of make this into a little hawk watching primer here, rather than just deal with the bird at hand, which we have already identified as a northern harrier. It is the bird in the center bottom with the banding code NOHA. Um,
Nah, not a funny bird at all.
but
Very
as you could
serious.
as you can see here, we've got four buteos around it, starting with Swainson's hawk at the top right, going over to red-tailed hawk and red-shouldered hawk below. And even though buteos all have sort of similar shape, as Nate said, sort of broad wings, short kind of
Chunky body.
yeah. Um, The red-tailed hawk is sort of the classic buteo. Like if you're going to throw up a buteo shape, it's also the buzzards of Europe are the same shape.
Yeah, it's the most common, one of the most common, if not the most common raptor across the whole of the North American continent, all the way through,
Yes.
and I mean all of North America, all the way
Yes.
down into Costa Rica and all that. Red-tailed hawks, they are everywhere. So they're
Yeah.
good basic. They're a good starting place.
Yes, and it has that broad-winged, relatively short hand compared to the harrier. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the buteos, but especially the red tail, you'll see that the hand is shorter, the belly of the wings, which is the secondary, is deeper. The tail is shorter, the body is heavier, and as Nate said, it just gives it an overall chunkier feeling. We're going to go down to red-shouldered hawk now, at the bottom left, and red-shouldered is one of those birds that it has a unique shape when you see it soaring, like it is here, and it's got these the hand is kind of it pushes its wings forward, and I always think it looks like it's reaching forward.
Greg, did you ever play with those little bird balancing toys where the bird balances on your fingertip on its bill, and then it's kind of the wings kind of push forward around it to provide? It's like a little plastic toy that sometimes you
No,
get
I
at
haven't.
fairs or whatever. All right, anyway, well, maybe you don't even know what I'm talking about. But anyway, the wings push forward so that it will balance properly, and red-shouldered hawk always kind of look like that to me.
Yeah, yeah, and it's you'll also notice that the red-tailed hawk has dark patagials, which are the markings right here, sort of on the forearm. It's got those two dark kind of blotches, which you'll notice none of our other buteos have, and that's really a good mark for red-tailed hawk is the patagials. Going up to broad-winged hawk, which is the center of it's the second bird from the left. Very pale underneath, very pale wings. When they turn into the sun, they tend to flash white. It's got a short tail, relatively. It's got these paddle-like wings that are broad, hence the name. And the fingers, the hand is sort of. They tend to keep kind of. It's smaller, and the what was it be? P10 is short, so the outermost one is short in comparison to the others, and it tends to give this little sort of closed hand look with these paddle-shaped wings that is unique to broad-winged hawk. Swainson's hawk.
Sorry, I was looking up pictures of the balancing birds so people don't think I'm crazy. Sorry.
I thought I lost.
I'm sure all of what you said was exactly right.
I've lost Nate. I think this was. I was like, I've lost Nate, so I think this was a mistake to put this many birds in one picture because he's off doing a crossword puzzle or something.
I'll do a Swainson's hawk. So Swainson's hawk is a bird that people in the East should be on the lookout, even though it is primarily a Western bird, Great Plains bird, all the way west to California. They have a very distinctive shape when you see them flying, and it's something that stands out when you start getting comfortable with identifying raptors in flight. And yeah, it's very looks quite a bit like a northern harrier if you look at the profile.
It does. The tail is long. The wings are long.
Wings are long. They're kind of pointed and graduated towards the tip. They're like a stretched out broad-winged hawk almost. Both broad-winged tends to have kind of pointier wings than red-shouldered and stuff too. But Swainson's hawk is a very distinctive shape, and even though it can be also pale, pretty pale underneath, kind of that tannish beige that northern harrier, at least the northern harriers that we see in the south quite a bit, the young birds and the female birds tend to have.
And
I'm back on track.
Right on. And like red-tailed hawk and broad-winged hawk and many hawks, they're variable. They can be quite dark or quite pale underneath. But one thing they show in all plumages is the dark flight feathers. And you'll notice how the secondaries and primaries are dark and contrast with the wing lining. You look at red-tailed, broad-winged, red-shouldered, they don't have that. And when I got to see... I got to see 4 of them this last weekend. You really do notice it. I mean, the first Swainson's hawk we saw was at the very top of a very distant flock, a kettle of broad-winged hawks. There were probably 50 birds in the kettle, and somebody called that they had a Swainson's hawk at the top of the kettle, and as it turned and you could see the underside, it stood out immediately, even when it was a speck in the sky that you really couldn't see naked eye. You had to use binoculars or a scope. But as soon as you got on it, you could see those dark remiges, and Swainson's hawk is kind of unique in that sense, and can be easily identified.
Remiges.
So that takes us to the two most common accipiters. So we have a sharp-shinned hawk at the top and a Cooper's hawk, or a Koopy here.
No, these are not. This is not a Koopy. These are very clear what they are.
No, I'm saying between the two of them.
Between the two, collectively.
Yeah, and so these are classic soaring sharp-shinned and Coopers, and the differences are rather easy to see. The sharp-shinned kind of looks like a popsicle with wings attached. It's got that
big old tail.
It's got the kind of longish square tip tail.
I mean, big old head is what I meant to say. Sorry, I'm backwards.
No, I'm talking about the Sharpie.
The tail too. Oh. I am not. My head is not in the game.
Nate's back on the crossword puzzle. But compared to the Cooper's hawk below, the wings are shorter. They're kind of more paddle shaped. They're broader. The Cooper's hawk has kind of a long, flamboyant tail. It's got longer wings, not as much belly in the wings, and a bigger head, as Nate was saying. It's got a bigger head, and it just sort of gives a different shape.
Very thick at the base of the tail too. Exactly. We were talking about how sharp-shinned hawk tends to be very slender in the waist.
Yeah.
You can definitely see that in this bird. The sharp-shinned hawk, comes to almost an hourglass, and then the tail kind of flares a little bit out, whereas Cooper's hawk is just like straight down from the tail, the body all the way to the tail. Much thicker set bird, and that does for the most part. For most birds that you're likely to see, there are always, especially with the species pair, there are always birds that are going to kind of, like the one we saw earlier, that are going to confuse you because they're tweeners. But for the most part, these are Cooper's hawk is a much heavier set bird than sharp-shinned, which often looks quite petite.
And once you're familiar with them when they're migrating, I mean, now we're talking about migrating birds right now, birds that are in your backyard hunting, or in the park, or what. They're not gonna. The things we're talking about right now really don't apply so much. We're talking about birds migrating overhead. Coopers and Sharpie have different flying styles. Sharpie tends to flicker its wings. It tends to flap a lot, whereas Cooper's hawk has a slower wing beat and doesn't flap as much, and it soars more than a sharp-shinned hawk. So I'm
not sure if flicky versus choppy really means a lot, but go out and find a flying Cooper's hawk and sharp-shinned hawk, and you will see what we're talking about.
Exactly. So we know you've been paying close attention here.
Obviously.
Using all this information, what do we got?
Snappy Sharpie. I wish I could see this bird fly.
Yeah.
Moving images are definitely more helpful for these two.
There is, but I feel pretty confident calling this bird from Fort Myers, Florida, a sharp-shinned hawk.
I tend to agree. I think the tail, especially, very, very clean, very square. You can see kind of the hourglass shape a little bit going on here. And, Sharpies, especially when they're flying with the wind at their backs, they kind of do that thing where every hawk does this, and we'll talk about this in a second, but they really like to push their wrists up quite a bit so that their head almost kind of disappears between them. And that's a very kind of classic Sharpie profile.
Absolutely. And so we talked about birds soaring and kettling a second ago. When you find birds like that migrating, and they get a thermal, and they ride the thermal up, and then at some point they decide it's time to move, and they take off, and it's called streaming. And if you get a big kettle of
today.
Exactly, you get a big kettle of broad-winged hawks, and they just start taking off in a line, and just suddenly just all zip off and follow each other. And they present a different profile. And so here we have birds streaming. And as Nate said, that sort of
Their
the way
bandwidth is appropriate.
the way the head disappears. We've got a sharp-shinned hawk on the left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We have a
clean
Cooper's
tail,
hawk.
hourglass body. It's nice.
We have a Cooper's hawk in the middle. And again, these illustrations here are meant to be the gestalt. These birds, they move, they change shape. I look at thousands of pictures of birds every month, it seems, and when trying to put together stuff like this, birds move their feathers, but as they flap their wings and everything else, you get this sort of sense of, as I said, gestalt, where there's sort of a look that gives away what it is. And this sharp-shinned hawk on the left, which kind of looks like a flying mushroom, the head is really kind of sunk in between the shoulders, the wrists that are pushed forward, as Nate said. Cooper's hawk in the middle here really doesn't show that.
No.
It doesn't push its wrists as far forward typically. It has a bigger head.
Big old head.
And it has a more flamboyant, graduated tail. Now, on the right, I included two views of broad-winged hawks, just to show the difference in flight. So, if we go back to let's go back one more, to the broad-winged hawk here, you'll see it has that sort of paddle-shaped short tail kind of look to it, but then moving into this view, we see it doesn't look at how similar the wing shape is to the Cooper's hawk in this at this angle.
Wings are
so
a bit
now
longer, though, compared to the
what's
body.
that?
Wings are longer compared to the body, though. That's the first thing that kind of
They are, but for people doing this for the not so familiar with these birds, it can be confusing. It can also be confusing how much accipiters can look like falcons when they point their wings like that.
Point their wings, yeah. I just want to point out that every time we talk about Gestalt, it makes me feel like we're like 17th century German philosophers discussing nihilism or something. Oi, Greg, the Gestalt.
All right. Well, you come up with a better word, and
no, it's the best
we'll put
of
it into
it's
our
the best
lexicon.
word to describe. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so I think that brings us to the
interesting.
end of our hawk presentation here.
Thank you.
At least for this week. I'm sure there will be
Hawks
more
are better than
coming up.
gulls, Greg. Hawks are better than gulls.
Oh no, we will definitely be doing gulls soon.
It's not gull season yet.
I know but it's coming. We're coming up on gull season. So now from Lorain, Ohio.
Oh yeah, good bird. I saw this one this morning when I was flicking through. What's this bird?
Yeah, so it's if you're familiar with fall migrants, it'll pretty much jump out at you right away what this bird is. But the one thing that I noticed on this, there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of these around right now, everywhere across the entire eastern half of the continent.
Yeah, the thing that jumped out about this bird to me is the long wings, and it just always, especially with the kind of event we had in Chicago. These birds are long distance migrants. They move, they fly. But aside from that, we've got a small bird. Tell by the size of the leaves. Very sharp pointed bill, kind of greenish, grayish. No real color underneath. A little bit of green on top, some green in the wings. There's some wing bars present, but they're not really. I mean, are they fully committed wing bars?
No,
entirely.
Half-hearted wing bars.
Yeah.
Half-hearted wing bars. So there's a couple warbler pairs that are really important to think about when we're looking at a bird like that, and that is chiffchaff and willow warbler. Sorry, we're on the wrong continent. This one. So this one is there's two
You're
warblers
on a roll today, pal.
I don't know what's wrong with me. So on first glance, it doesn't look like there's a lot going on with this bird, but there are some things that we want to look for. That pattern on the face is really important. It's got that dark eye line and kind of the
Mm-hmm.
pale eyebrow. I think the really important thing to think about with this bird is the fact that it's very gray and pale all the way across from almost the breast all the way to the back of the tail, and that's really important when we're thinking about the species pairs that this bird is often confused for. So there's two warbler species, Tennessee warbler and orange-crowned warbler, which frequently can look very similar, especially the first-year birds, especially first-year Tennessee warblers, which tend to be the yellowish, most yellow
Yep.
Tennessee warblers. Now, this isn't really a very yellow Tennessee warbler, though it is. I think it's a young bird. Um, so some differences between those two species pairs is you want to look at the underneath the tail. That's one of the most obvious places to look. Even if you have a very yellow Tennessee warbler that has like a bright yellow wash all the way from chin to the legs, it's always going to have a white undertail. What's the
Mm-hmm.
undertail coverts or what we call it? It's always going to be white underneath there. And also the very long wings, like you pointed out, Greg. Tennessee warbler is a long distance migrant. This is a bird that breeds across the boreal of Canada and migrates all the way to South America in the winter every single year. So it has long. We know from long distance migrants tend to have long wings. Orange-crowned warbler is a shorter distance migrant. It breeds across the boreal as well, but it winters in northern Central America, Caribbean, frequently across the southern tier of the United States as well. It's a
Yes.
bird that shows up
It's
in the
quite
winter
common in
here
the winter in
in the
South
southeast.
Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, South Florida, South Texas, the Gulf Coast usually have some orange-crowned warblers hanging around. So they have much shorter wings, and they're going to be kind of unicolored, orangey, green, olivey, whatever, all the way across from the under the bill, the throat, all the way to underneath the tail. So it's going to be more or less the same color all the way through. You can see that
And
this bird is not that. So I feel
no, and
pretty comfortable calling this a
I
Tennessee
spent so
warbler.
much time working on the hawks. I didn't have time to throw up a comp with orange crowned with this bird.
Mm-hmm.
But Nate, you did a
Maybe
fantastic
I'm
job.
sure we'll get some before the end of the year because
Yes.
that's another thing. Tennessee warbler. When I think September migration, early October migration, Tennessee warbler is a huge part, makes up a huge part of the biomass that's moving south. Whereas orange crowned
Yes.
warbler, shorter distant migrant, can handle colder temperatures, tends to be a later migrant. If most of the Tennessees are gone by the end of October, early November, orange crowned you will see through November a lot of times, at least in the southeast where I
Absolutely.
live, and you don't see them early on. So any like September orange crown is going to be
Yeah, and
unlikely, very unlikely.
where we're at, I mean, Lorain, Ohio is almost due east of Chicago. Um, it's the Tennessee warblers are on their way out.
Yeah, they're
and
pretty late by
orange
now.
crowned
Yeah.
warblers are on their way in
Mm-hmm.
right now.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
the other thing, one just last little thing to point out about this bird is the face. That, as Nate said, the orange crown tends to be just a darker bird overall, and the
Yeah.
eye arcs tend to
Yes.
stand out a little bit more than they
Yes, that's
do
correct.
on this bird. This bird, the dark line through the eye. I mean, if you kind of squint at it, you can almost see the spring plumage
Mm-hmm.
with the dark eye line and the paler
For sure.
supercilium kind of hidden in there among the green and grays
Yeah,
of the face.
a lot of these species pairs that give people a lot of trouble, things like sharpshin, Cooper's hawk, orange crowned, Tennessee warbler. I would go so far as to say that 90% of the birds can be relatively easily identified. It's that 10%, that tough 10% where they overlap in some ways that
Yeah.
give them the the notion that these are difficult identifications. Most of these birds are going to be identifiable without too much trouble, as this one
Yeah.
is. It's showing a lot of classic Tennessee features, even though it's got those wing bars that, like I said, they're half-hearted. They're not really trying. That's probably an early bird. Those will wear off as the season goes on, and you won't see them by spring. So those are fresh. Those are
Yep.
fresh, brand new flight feathers.
We are behind schedule. Not that we actually have
Oh
a
my
hard
gosh, we
fast
talked too
schedule,
much
but
about
I just wanted to break for a second to say
flamingos.
hi to Mia McPherson. They
Hey,
made it in.
Mia,
Hi,
friend from
Mia.
Utah.
Okay, next bird.
This is
we're just
easy, Greg. It's a warbler from Tennessee. This is clearly another Tennessee warbler.
okay. Let's move on. um, compared to the Tennessee warbler from Ohio that we saw just a second ago, This bird has really
Those are real wing bars.
those are real
Those are the
wing
real
bars.
deal. Yeah. No
And
messing around.
it has this overall kind of grayish look to it. It's hard to tell because the bird is got stuff in its mouth, but the bill looks a little bit heavy.
Quite a
But
bit thicker than the Tennessee.
the fact that it's at a feeder is a big clue, because there aren't. This is a warbler, another fall warbler. There aren't very many warblers that come to feeders, and this one regularly
I can think of
does.
two that regularly do.
Yeah,
Especially in the southeast, we get the yellow-rumped warblers obviously come to feeders pretty suet, I should say.
yeah.
Is this bird eating seeds or it's eating?
I can't tell what it's eating.
Bugs are attracted to the grain. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, as you say, Greg, big old wing bars on this guy. And look at those eye arcs too.
Yep.
Those are pretty obvious. Got a broken eye ring up on the top and the bottom. This is another one of those birds that has a species trio or species pair that sort of can give you some trouble. The bay-breasted blackpoll pine trio, very similar birds, but a bird this chunky, a bird with this big of an eye arc, all over kind of green, not kind of muddy yellowish brown all over, not any like clean streaking like you'd expect to see on a blackpoll or any sort of nice apricot wash under the wings that you would like to see on a bay-breasted. This is the other bird that comes to feeders in the southeast. And I know you're going to point out something. I'm going to let you do that, Greg. But this is a pine warbler. This is one of those kind of muddy pine warbler looks that they give you. They can look all sorts of ways.
The two things I was going to point out is the kind of darkish face, the auriculars, and the way it sort of separates from the throat. So we have a paler throat and kind of a darker face. That is something that we frequently see in pine warblers. But then the other thing is that kind of pale, yellowish, tannish, kind of ochreish wash that's coming up the side of the neck. We talked about that last time, and that is something that pine warbler shows in all plumages. It's super subtle. You might not notice it every time, but when you do, it's a good mark. And there's only really two of our warblers that show that, and that's Cape May and pine. And this is very obviously, for a lot of reasons, not a Cape May. Although Cape May is one of the other birds that shows up in feeders. What's
That's
that?
true. Cape May would have just more of all the stuff. Like it would be more streaky on the breast. It would be, more pattern on the face. It would have a much tinier, little tiny bill. There's just a lot more going on a Cape May than on a pine warbler, especially these kind of fall pine warblers that look kind of muddy and washed out. Not a lot very clear going on here, except for the wing bars, of course.
Yes. So pushing on, this comes to us from Sacramento, California. First of all, where's
the bird here, Greg?
Where's the bird? Okay, so I included this one. I think it's pretty straightforward what this bird is, but I included this one because you'd never see them, and you when you do see them, you never see them like this. So because we're running out of time, we're just going to kind of jump to the chase, or cut to the chase here, and that is this is a nightjar, which includes our goat sucker, exactly, which includes our whippoorwill, chuckwill's widow, nighthawks, and the western counterpart to the whippoorwill, which is poorwill, common poorwill. These birds are named after their calls. If you Google that and listen to their calls, or if you have a bird app on your phone.
Their calls are actually a much more exciting thing about them than the way they look. They look like a pile of...
Oh, I disagree. We're going to fight about that.
Well, I would say there are some birds that the experience of that bird is heightened by the vocalizations that bird make. So, like, if I were to... rails are kind of the other way around. Like, seeing a rail is always a really cool experience. Hearing them, they sound like frogs. But poorwill, like, you got to hear it. You got to hear this thing in addition to seeing it, because they sound so cool. Yeah,
so the two birds in question that this might be would be common poorwill and lesser nighthawk. The the situation is just not right for a nighthawk, unless it's injured. They just don't nestle down in the leaves like that. Especially at this time of year, you tend to see them anywhere. They sit horizontally on tree branches, or fence tops, or I've even seen them on power lines, just kind of hanging onto the power line. But we also don't see any wings, and nighthawks have very long wings that come to the tip of the tail. But that was the thing that first threw me about this bird, because we don't see the wings, and common poorwill has a very short tail and relatively long wings.
It's very compact little nighthawk.
It is, and it too, the wingtips come to the tip of the tail. And I looked at this and I'm like, we don't see any wingtips here. What the heck is going on? This is kind of, but common poorwill, with its wings below the tail, you can see here's a common poorwill on the right that's just let its wings droop down a little bit, and you can see how short the tail is but how long the wings are in comparison. You can also see in this comp the gray top of the head and blackish face, and overall pattern that nails this as a common poorwill. But yeah, so the only thing that kind of got me there was that the wings were under the tail, because I would have expected to see the wings on top and hiding most of the tail. And if you Google pictures of this bird, you'll see that.
This is a wild species. I don't know if folks know this, but it's I think it's the only species of bird in the ABA area, maybe all of North America, that hibernates. And it's sort of like they go into a torpor for several days over the coldest month of the year. Like they'll wedge themselves in a little crevice and rocks and just kind of wait out the cold weather there. Just absolutely wild stuff.
And there are other birds that do that. Hummingbirds,
hummingbirds will do a torpor, but I think famously, the poorwill does it like for multiple days rather than just overnight.
Right.
I think.
You're correct. So yeah, this is a common poorwill from Sacramento, California. And now we are on to what I think is our last bird for the day here. It's from Hennepin, Minnesota.
Yeah, so grassland birds with black tails and white edges are actually a pretty common look. That's not something. It's not. I mean, that's a very distinctive tail, but that's not on its own enough to identify this bird, because there's a couple birds like that. Horned lark, for instance, and American pipit, and probably a couple others. But I think there's some longspurs that are like that too. But those are the two that immediately come to mind when I see this image. These images. Weeks, Chris Ortega says, a torpor state for weeks.
Yeah,
amazing.
So I'm seeing a few things here. I don't think this is a horned lark for a couple of reasons. One, I don't see any yellow. Now the pictures leave a lot to be desired, but I don't see any yellow underneath. And in the picture on the left, I don't really see any black on the tail on top. And horned lark, and I think we had a horned lark here the last time or the time before.
We frequently have horned larks.
And because it's one of the most
easily misidentified bird or easily confused bird.
Yeah, as they fly away, especially like in a flock of longspurs, the horned larks have black tails with white outer tail feathers on top, and you can really kind of tell them apart pretty quickly. But in the picture on the right, just kind of yells pipit at me. So I believe what we're looking at here is an American pipit.
I agree. You can't really see much of the head here, but you can see what appears to be the head, and it does look kind of sandy beige. I mean, I don't see anything that would suggest the sort of well-marked underparts that you would see on a horned lark. For the most part, it looks like kind of dark wing pits, kind of that beige streaking, kind of an overall tan color all throughout. I would agree with you on this one, Greg. American pipit for me as well.
But as we always
Grant
say,
Ellis asks, lark sparrow? Question mark?
No, lark sparrow. It has white outer tail feathers, but then it's got white spots on the tail feathers, the 2 or 3 tail feathers inward. So it has a different a different pattern on the tail.
I
on the
believe you.
tail
I'm just
tip.
checking that out.
Now, I believe, and I don't believe that they.
This is way too green for a lark sparrow to be in. They're like sand.
Yeah, lark sparrows like sand. Although, and Hennepin in Minnesota, I don't know where that is, but exactly. But Minnesota is getting kind of north for lark sparrow.
This National Geographic guide doesn't show them in flight. Should have gone with Sibley.
Sibley always shows flight, so that's always your better bet.
Yeah, and I think that, and as Grant also points out, the head would probably be will be a little darker. And structurally, it doesn't quite look right for lark sparrow to me too, which is a
actually,
long-tailed bird.
Looking at it now, lark sparrow
short body.
Lark sparrow has all of the tail feathers tipped in white, and also lark sparrow doesn't have that kind of square tail. It's kind of rounded and fanned.
Yeah, that's true. It is.
The tail is graduated and it's very flamboyant. Lark sparrows are very flamboyant, and when they show off that tail, you notice it.
Indeed. Great. Thanks for pointing that out, though. Good discussion.
So we are rolling up on the hour. ABA members, want to remind you to join us at ABA Community. And those of you who are not members, sign up. It costs a cup of coffee a month to join the ABA.
Drag our identifications on ABA Community all you want.
That's absolutely right.
You can troll us, tell us we're wrong, all of that stuff. In fact, we encourage you to do so.
We do. So yeah, get over to ABA Community and join the conversation. There's always a lot of fun stuff happening there. So we've got a couple of minutes here.
Mia says she found a leucistic sparrow this morning. I would like to see a leucistic sparrow.
Throw some pictures up if you have it in the group, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah, bring it on.
What's happening in YouTube, Nate? Anybody chatting?
Most the same. A lot of people talking about they enjoyed your hawk watching comp photo.
Thank you.
George Munoz, our old friend George Munoz.
Hey, George!
Drive him nuts. They most look the same to him.
You'll get past that, George. Trust me. As
George
we say
says,
frequently,
will there be a community weekend in SoCal at some point?
Boy, would that be fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, great birding in all over Southern California. Los Angeles, San Diego.
Cinnamon Stewart says flocks of pine siskins are coming through. Yeah, we've had a lot of pine siskins migrating through too. That when we were doing the Hawk Watch Saturday, we had siskins almost constantly.
I don't know if y'all have seen, but the Winter Finch report came out last week, and Tyler Hoare said pine siskins on the move this winter. Most of the winter finches will not be. They'll be staying relatively in place, but pine siskins look like they are going to be moving in numbers. So be on the lookout for that. And it sounds like anecdotally that is bearing out based on what y'all are seeing.
Initial reports. Nancy Carpenter Kitchen asks, how long does it take for a rarity to show up in a list? I'm not exactly sure what
the list maintained by various state rarity committees, I assume.
I don't know. I mean, or does that mean eBird?
Year.
I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
eBird,
understand the question
pretty much
exactly.
As soon as the eBird reviewer will accept it for the rarity committees, usually takes a little bit longer to officially. There usually is an annual update at the end of the year. For the most part, I can only speak to the committee that I'm on, and then we add it, and then it's on.
ABA
I mean,
list
it's mostly a formality.
Friday,
Most everyone accepts it that it's on the list at that point anyway.
Yeah, and in the case of first ABA records, so for instance, the gray gull in Florida, I've gotten a few questions about that. That will be added after it's reviewed by our checklist committee, and then we add birds to the checklist twice a year in the summer and then at the end of the year. So anything that's going to be added to the ABA checklist will be either in the summertime or at right at the end of the year.
Florida gets a first crack at it. The Florida Ornithological Records Committee will look at that. They're pretty quick, actually, as states go. I mean, they've already accepted some potential first ABA records in the beginning of 2023, so I imagine they'll get on that pretty quickly, and it will probably be on the ABA list maybe by the end of the year.
Okay, now I think I
Um,
understand what's going on. So Nancy Carpenter, Kitchen, and Christy Bass are both talking about birds in state lists, and the state records committees tend to work the same way. They get
State/province.
information and they debate these birds in committee, and then if they feel that the identification is solid, it's added to the state checklist. And that's
usually
done.
an annual update,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
At minimum. Well, some take longer. It depends on. It's an all volunteer position, so you know how those things go.
So Susan Harrison enjoyed your joke about willow warbler and chiff chaff. So at least you scored a point on that one from someone instead of making
it's
most
like
of us
people
groan.
that appreciate it. Yeah, some folks have seen Virginia warbler in Massachusetts last week for a state record. Yes, Virginia warbler is an interesting bird. You know, I think there's a lot of birds kind of moving out of the Great Basin this fall into this. I think this is going to be a big winter for birds like Virginia's warbler, cass and sparrow. There's already been one up in Washington. Pinyon jay was recorded in Washington this week. Those birds tend to react more to environmental changes than other birds, and it's been a relatively, I believe, aside from the hurricane that went through there back in September, it's been a pretty dry summer for that part
I think
of the world.
November
That tends to mean those birds move out.
I think November east of the plains is going to be lit this year.
Yeah.
I think it's
Virginia's warbler is one to keep an eye out for. What are some other brewer's sparrow, cass and sparrow? Those sorts of birds would be good candidates for.
We're already seeing Townsend's warbler. Sage
warbler.
thrasher is another.
Townsend solitaire.
We've already had a Townsend solitaire in Chicago.
There was a report of one in Washington D.C. today, but it has not yet.
That's
been
a
confirmed.
good bird
That'd
in
be
Washington
a first
D.C.
district record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Nate, we are past the hour, and all of you guys, it has been wonderful once again.
It's been
hanging
real.
out with you and talking about birds. Do your thing.
As always, join the ABA. We would love to have you as a member. We're a membership organization, and we certainly appreciate anything you can do. You get a lot of great things, access to our magazines, discounts to our partners, all sorts of cool stuff. Go to
$2.50 a month.
And enjoy it. We will be back in a couple weeks. If you would like to get an update on when we do these events or these programs, please go to the aba.org, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and sign up for our Flight Calls email. We'll give you a heads up when we're about to do these things. Greg, have a great happy Halloween, I guess. Maybe it'll be before Halloween before we do again. Have a great fall season, late fall sparrow season.
Right on. Peace out, y'all.
We'll see you. Bye, everybody.